Hey, what's up, guys? Hope everyone is doing well today. The stock market is closed here in the US today, a little bit of a holiday, so I actually started my day late. Took most of yesterday off, didn't look at the charts except for early in the morning. I did close out a little short trade that I was in, and for the most part, kind of just sitting tight here, watching the price action. There are some alts that are still looking pretty good, showing some life. And so I will go over some of those. We'll take a look at the names. And so the plan here today is basically to do a little bit of a live chart scan like we've done for the last, I don't know, several weeks here on the Monday or Tuesday into the week. I'll do a quick scan of the charts, some names that are going to be on my radar, and then I'll go over some thoughts. Firstly, I'll go over some thoughts on what's happening with BTC, what I'm looking for, what I think will happen, and how I'm going to be approaching the market this week from a short-term trading perspective. So always keep that in mind. And any other names you guys want to look at if we have time. I'm going to try to limit this, like I said, maybe to 35, 40 minutes. We'll see how good I do on that. But I'm going to try to limit it, so I will move a little quickly. But don't worry, there'll be plenty of other updates throughout the week. Some most likely at least another live stream or two, and we'll just see how things go here. And so thanks for the likes, by the way. Thanks for the thumbs ups, the comments. Looks like people are jumping on. I just posted the link on the Slack general channel. So for those of you that are in the Slack group, if you can't catch the whole stream, what I'm going to do is kind of narrow it down to a handful of names that I'm going to be watching. And then I'll post those charts and some thoughts around them in the charts channel in the Slack group. So for those of you that are members there, let's see. I think that's it. So why don't we just get to it here? Thank you for the updates there, guys. And yeah, feel free to keep posting names. Looks like we got London in the house, New York, California. All right. Afghanistan. Wow, really? That's awesome. Chicago. Got folks from all over the world, as always. That's what I love about the crypto community. It's just so global and so broad. It's really, really neat to see. Just wondering what is what the chart looks like to you. Yeah, I'm gonna definitely cover that here first. I'll look at BTC. I'll give a quick update on that and just some thoughts, and we'll go from there. Croatia in the house, Amsterdam, and of course my fellow Arizonans. Beautiful weather outside today. All right, let's look at the BTC chart here. So I'm going to zoom out here first. I'm going to start with the daily chart here. And this is going on USD on Bitstamp. They all trade pretty closely right now, so there's not a lot of spread here. But looking at the BTC daily chart, there's a couple of things to note here. First, on the bullish side of things, this latest pullback so far has held the daily 10 EMA. The moving averages continue to trend higher, so that's all positive there. The last big base we saw on the daily chart was around this $8,200 level on the BTC chart, and we can see that the 22 EMA on the daily is pretty much right at that level. And so I covered this briefly on the last stream last week. This little zone in between here is a little bit of a value zone when you're looking at some trend following and looking at that. Now it's important to note that the moving averages have fanned out quite a bit, so they were starting to get up there, a little stretched, but even on the pullback down to this zone, it's pretty much the same story from last week. There's really not a whole lot to be overly concerned about until we break below 8,200. At that point, things really start to look negative. It looks like this big volume spike was kind of the end of the move, followed by the fake out on Saturday/Sunday, and then the quick reversal. And I'll go into some of the details on the lower time frame. I did manage to catch a very nice short-term spike to the downside. It was aggressive. It was an aggressive entry. I was playing it with some margin there, so I closed it out right away. But now what I'm going to be looking for is, does this hold? Is this the beginning of a potential downtrend, a broader pullback, or is this just going to be another blip along the way as things continue to march higher. And that's going to be an interesting thing to be watching this week because it could be a turning week. And as I mentioned last week, we were pretty much right at that key resistance zone, the 200 EMA, horizontal price resistance, the downtrend line, the 618 retracement level. There's just a lot there. And so it really wasn't that surprising to see a quick rejection from there. Whether that quick rejection was just some short-term profit taking or whether it was the shorts piling in or a little bit of both, it just really wasn't that surprising to see that pullback from there. And there was a lot of volume, and certainly on the technical levels, it created a big outside reversal day, which is technically bearish when you look at the fact that, you know, this candle here way overshot the prior day's candle and then closed below the prior 2 days candles, technically the prior 3-day candles, and the outside range was just very big. I mean, that made for a very wide range. If you look at the total dollar range of that single day's candle, it was about a $7,500 range, or $725 range. And so, you know, not huge, but certainly definitely worth noting, pretty big percentage wise. Yeah, good comment. It was on the weekend. And so you could say, hey, there's a little suspect there. I don't give the weekends, I don't write them off as much as others do. I certainly give the weekends their fair share because we've seen some pretty outstanding moves over the weekends in recent past. So I'm not going to say, hey, it was a weekend, it doesn't really matter. It absolutely does, in my opinion, especially in the crypto market because it's really 24/7. Is it easier to move things during the weekend? I think so. I mean, you got a lot of Wall Street out and Forex markets are out, but nonetheless, there's a lot of algos playing the markets, and there's people with stops in place and all that. So they absolutely matter. But so looking from the bull side of things, the daily chart still holding up. Technically speaking, not overbought. I mean, at the peak, the RSI was poking into the 70s, has now pulled back a little bit into the 60 range. The MACD is trickling down here as expected with this most recent pause. If we go to the Node Insider site, for those of you that are subscribers, you would have seen the email yesterday early morning, my time at least, because of that big outside reversal. The 4-hour strategy did finally go flat. The daily is still technically long. I'm curious to see what the daily BMI is here. Well, I guess we could look at it here, but I'll pull up the chart. The daily BMI is at 65, and so if it tricks down a little bit more, I would imagine we'll see a close signal there, so it'll say flat on the daily. 4-hour BMI is pretty low right now. It's at the 0.3, pulled back pretty good at that point, and so the bot status is flat after being long for in and out for a lot of this most recent move. I went long up here on the 4-hour chart and then had some in and out here, went long again, but could be a little bit of a shakeout. So like I said, technically speaking, the bull case, you're still seeing the trend in place on the daily chart, but on the shorter time frames, things are looking a little bit more hairy. So let's go look at that here. So this is the 4-hour view. What's BMI? It's not obvious, and so I will answer that question here shortly. Looking at the 4-hour chart here, so this is moving from that daily chart to the 4-hour here. The broader trend, again, still technically in place. We can see that this is now testing that lower trend line that we've seen march along here. Let me move that up a little bit here. So this is what I would be looking at here, right? It's kind of breaking that trend line finally. Certainly has broken that little mini, I don't even know if you would call it a parabolic move, but it kind of was, right? It was just a nice steady trend. But we're seeing that break. If we zoom in here a little bit, the 10 EMA on that 4-hour chart has now bearishly crossed below the 22 EMA on that 4-hour chart. And so that's, the first signal there, as well as the price now living below those moving averages. It's holding back. Now, we have seen some near-term support coming in here. We've seen a few wicks to the downside that have very briefly touched that 8,500 level, and so far that has held at this point. Would not surprise me to see a little bit of a short-term bounce, a little bit of a pop off this level, but that's what I'm going to really be watching this week is what happens. And when I say, more like not even this week, more like the next day or two, what happens after that, right? That's going to be the interesting thing. Do we get this quick bounce off of this level, that makes a lower high and then really starts to roll over at that point. That would be my personal opinion as far as what I'm going to be looking for. If I start to see this lower high that doesn't get anywhere near the top of this range, which at this point would be around, upper 9,000, maybe 9,100. If it can't even get past 9K, that's going to look a little bit more bearish to me. And then I will likely at that point reload on the short position here. I did take a short over the weekend. Again, it was an aggressive entry, and my plan was it was a little bit more of a scalp. It turned out to be a much bigger short than I thought it would be. But what I was looking at was, we had multiple peaks on the way up. And then over the weekend, we find, things were tightening up really good here. It was kind of like the next move is going to be interesting. Could have certainly broken from there. But what ended up happening is had that quick spike to the upside. The bearish divergence continued to play out during that time frame. And then there was really no follow through. It kind of popped up, pulled back. And once it started to move that way, I said, I'm going to fade this rally a little bit here. And so we saw this over the weekend, kind of the breakout, and then just things didn't look that great. And so I got pretty lucky on just the entry and the exit on that move. It was really late my Saturday evening, and so I took a margin trade here. My average price was around literally 9,100. I think I took two entries, one just above 9,100, one around 9,050 or something like that. And then sure enough, very quick spike to the downside. That big of a move, I thought we're going to see a big bounce off of this move. We still haven't, but I ended up just kind of closing that out. So I was literally in this trade for maybe 8 hours, if even that. Probably not even that. So it was kind of a quick trade there. Closed that out. And from a Bitcoin perspective, I'm now flat. I've been just kind of sitting tight, watching this play out. As I said, the daily chart, not a whole lot to worry about. 4-hour chart, potentially a little bit of a turning point. I'm thinking we at least test this 8,300 range, maybe lower, but for now, I'm going to look for a bounce. It's just kind of flagging out. You got this big drop. We're just kind of sitting tight, choppy little range here. Moving averages is crossed over. So a little bit of a neutral zone. Who knows which way it could just break lower from here and certainly just continue its trend. But at this point, from a shorting perspective, just because the daily chart is still relatively strong, I'm going to be a little bit more cautious until it looks like, hey, this 4-hour trend is really turned. And at that point, what I'm looking for is a lower high. If I see a lower high and it starts to roll over again, then I may reload some of that short trade. But for now, I'm just kind of a little bit more neutral on the BTC side and just sitting tight here as things just kind of consolidate today. So that's the BTC play here for now. But I don't know. What do you guys think? Was 9,200 the near-term top and we're going to go lower, or is that a fake out and things will continue higher here? If they do continue higher, then high 9,500s is really the next major target. 9K, that pause was expected around that 9,100. I've been a broken record about that here for the last several weeks. We finally hit that 9,000, 9,100 level. And if this is just a blip pullback and it just continues higher, then that's your next major target between 9,500 and 10K. And so at that point, it'd be really interesting to see what happens from there. But it just depends on the strategy, right? If you got a little bit more time, certainly you can play the quicker moves that way. If you're just more kind of looking at the charts a few times a week, maybe some swing trading stuff, then generally speaking, your daily chart's going to be your better friend there. 4-hour, maybe for some more kind of tactical entries if things are overbought or oversold here in the near term, right? That's how you'll use that. If you're doing higher time frames, you really don't care about what's happening on the 1-hour views. So that's it on the BTC side of things. Really not a whole lot. Interesting thing to note here on the weekly chart, the last 2 weeks have been very positive on above average volume compared to the prior weeks. Big picture, this is looking pretty interesting. A little bit of a multi-month base starting to curl higher. The weekly 10 EMA is still right below the 22 here, but it's not going to take much at this point to pull that higher. So if Bitcoin continues to push higher this week, then that's going to create that bullish crossover on the weekly chart here. So my personal opinion, beyond the near-term trading stuff, certainly, this could make for a quick short on, and it doesn't look like a whole lot in the big scheme of things, but if you're trading even with a little bit of margin, $400, $500, $600 to the downside, really starts to add up. But in the big scheme of things, looking at the weekly charts and the daily chart, I certainly feel like this has the potential to really be, the low, and then things start to just march higher here going into the halving and beyond. But as I've said before, I'm still going to take a cautionary approach here. I'm not necessarily going to load up the boat at this point for long-term holds until one of two things. Either price starts to push above this zone and then maybe retest it and holds, or if we do get that pullback after we find a solid low on the pullback, wherever that pullback is, whether it's a higher low, which would be good personally, make a higher daily low on the pullback, or if it takes out these prior lows down here, which that'd be a big pullback. But if you're talking 6Ks or lower, then at that point, I think from a longer term perspective, I'm going to be a lot more bullish, a lot more aggressive. But from a longer term hold, either way, right, whether it breaks out here or whether it really pulls back into April or May, I'm bullish on Bitcoin here just because a lot of fundamental reasons. And I think, the longer term looks solid after what we saw in 18 and the rally last year and the pullback here. And there's just a lot of things that I'm looking at here that will kind of determine that. But near term, we're in an interesting juncture. We've been looking at this level for some time. And, we saw the pullback almost to the penny. Let me pull the 200-day moving average on there. I mean, almost, it played out. It played out almost perfectly. And so the big question is this the beginning of a bigger pullback, or is this just the quick, the quick shakeout, or the quick profit taking right at that resistance level? But, this zone was certainly the level to be watching both for a target on the upside as well as some potential pausing levels. And so far, I'm thinking we're going to see a little bit of a pause. And so that's kind of the way I'm going to be approaching the week. So short term, look for that quick bounce on the 4-hour chart. We'll see where that lands. If it makes a lower high, for me, that's going to potentially be an opportunity to load on some shorts here and then take it for another leg down to maybe 8,300 or so. And then on the way down, if it does just spike lower from here, then what I'm going to be looking for is some oversold conditions on the 4-hour chart as we approach, the next major support level, and see how things look from there. But I certainly won't be necessarily buying the dip per se until I want to see a little bit more cards come out of the table and go from there. So that's the BTC side of things. Let me take a breather here, kind of catch up on some of the questions, and then we'll start looking at the alts, because I think there's still some opportunity in the altcoin space. And in fact, I'm still long on Tezos. How's that one looking here today? Tezos is still looking pretty good here. Let me move that guy out. That one's looking good here. And I'll go over, let me stop all these alerts just so we don't get any blips during the stream here. But Tezos, interesting. So we'll take a look at that guy. There's a handful of names that are still outperforming on the BTC pairs, and I think that's just real positive all around from the crypto space. We've really been, it's been a long time since we've seen a nice altcoin, I hate to say it, altcoin season, but a prolonged altcoin rally. It's just been they've been so short-lived for so long, and we're seeing the market cap finally come off. This is the alts market cap, by the way, and so this is looking at everything except for Bitcoin. Certainly, it includes a lot of names that track very closely to Bitcoin, right? Things like Bitcoin Cash and Ethereum and all that. But the fact that things have really come off quite a bit and are really finding a little bit of a base, maybe we see another one of these here going into the halving or right after the halving. But that's going to be interesting to see if the broader market cap can continue to expand. I mean, last year that was a 200% increase in the names that excluded Bitcoin, going into the summer here. Of course, so the BTC level, after April, most names underperformed as Bitcoin went on that very powerful move. But here we're seeing this big spike in volume last week on the altcoin names. And that, of course, that was a lot of the big caps, right? That was Bitcoin Cash and BSV and some of those names that did have massive volume coming in. But nonetheless, some pretty positive moves from the altcoin perspective. So definitely something to make note of as we start 2020. This is the weekly chart, and yeah, there's going to be wiggles and ups and downs along the way, but is this the beginning of a of a turning in the trend here for the altcoin markets, and will we begin seeing them outperform Bitcoin again? I think so, personally. I think that there's a good chance of that. As we've seen, the Bitcoin dominance chart has literally gone from one extreme to the other, going from a low of 36 to a high of 72. How much higher could it have gone, right? Make 80% of the dominance again. I mean, it's up there, and it looks like the BTC dominance chart is starting to kind of make lower highs, starting to break some lows here. So it's going to be interesting to see if we're finally getting that little bit of a rotation, and the alts are going to turn out to be some big winners this year versus Bitcoin. Doesn't mean that Bitcoin price is going down, but if the alts outperform on the way up, then all will be peachy in crypto land and people will be happy again. But we'll see. All right, so let's go to some of these charts here. I'm going to make a list here looking at a few names. I've got a few names already on my radar here. We'll look at Tezos again. I'll look at it from the BTC perspective. Link has been very strong here. The Bitcoin Cash names are back again. We'll look at some of those here. BCH, BSV, BAT, Basic Attention Token, is looking good. There's the Digix DAO microcap gold-based token. I'll skip that one for now. Zcash, Pivx, the privacy names just continue to be on here. They've been on this list for quite some times. Pivx in and out. It's not as strong as like Zcash or Monero from the privacy names, but we'll look at those. Stellar Lumens, Aeon. All right, Walton, Ethereum Classic, again pulling back from that climactic move. We'll take a look at that guy. And let's see here. I'll pass on DX, Steam, Cardano. That's the other one that was on the radar. Cardano and Litecoin. And then any other names you guys want to look at here. Let me do this real quick to see if I can add any more names to the list here. So we got Zcash, Tezos, Pivx, Link, Digix DAO, BAT, Zcash. Let me pull up some more here. Stellar Lumens. I'm just scanning here. Maybe Theta. Land was on Pocket Pivot yesterday. All right, let's just pause with those. I'll do a few names, and then I'll do Walton. Looks like somebody you guys want to do BNB. We'll take a look at BNB. And yeah, let's look at XRP and along with Stellar Lumens. So we'll kind of do those one after another. And let's pause there because that's going to give us, that's going to give me at least 15 names to cycle through here. And then we'll go from there. So, all right, so let's start with the bigger names here first. I just did Tezos. Let's just finish that guy up real quick. Looking at the Tezos, I'm going to go from the BTC pair. Just continues to move off the low here after that big pullback. Came on the radar last week when I saw it hit the alerts. It was, it was interesting because this was showing oversold over alerts back in here. And then all of a sudden I saw an on the move alert and it had this big flash off the lows and just kind of started putting a little bull flag here on this BTC chart. And on the USD side, did pull back a little bit more with that pullback in Bitcoin. But then we saw the break above trend here basically yesterday, early today, however you want to say it. And it's pushing higher. Now, there was a big selling bar there, but it's pushing higher. First target on this is fib retracement levels. That's really how I'm going to be playing this because it's a bounce trade. It's a counter trend rally. If you look at some resistance here, that'd be your first target. It's kind of in the middle. And then above that, 50% and 618. I think a major target, if it continues to just have a big counter trend move versus Bitcoin, will be the 618. At that point, if it really rallies, if it gets that high, that's gonna probably be my let's get out of the way and see what happens after that move. Above that, then you're talking the neckline of this double bottom, but that's a huge move. So one day at a time, right? It won't get there straight away. This is 16%. This is 26%. That's not that much for a crypto, but one day at a time. And it's going to really depend on what Bitcoin does. If Bitcoin really starts to roll over, I suspect a lot of these alts will have the brakes paused on them. But there's always a handful of names that end up being the, what do we call it? The port in the storm, right? The anti-Bitcoin. And I'm wondering if Tezos is going to be that name this time. It's just always interesting to see. And sometimes it's a small cap name, but I've often seen when you get a little bit of a pullback phase in Bitcoin and the alts, even if it's a week or so phase, there's always a name that just like surprises everybody and just starts moving up, moving up, moving up, and it's like, whoa, what happened? And I'm wondering if that's going to be Tezos this time around. So nonetheless, it's on my radar. I do have a position open on it, just full disclosure there. I'm not pumping my bags because I plan on holding to around 1900 at least, unless it really starts to break down again. So just something I'm going to be watching there. What was the other one? Link was looking good here. Link was setting up all of last week. I did mention it during one of my midweek updates. At the time, it was right here, and I said, hey, keep an eye on it for a potential breakout. Obviously, that broke out. Before that, over the weekend, just kind of consolidated through the weekend versus Bitcoin, and it's setting up for a potential another leg higher. It's right into the, I have these two yellow lines marked, and these were prior targets. If we look left, that was this resistance back here, and that was this swing high up here. And it's just always interesting that it starts to respect those levels, right? And let's zoom back in. I mean, it's just kind of chopping around in between that, but so far it's holding this lower line here at the bottom. That's about 29.5 or so on the BTC pair. But volume's coming in. I'm thinking we see another leg higher before it's over. Looking at that daily chart, looking really strong here off the lows, higher highs, higher lows starting to form. And so if it breaks out above this 31.4, then there's really not a lot of resistance until the major highs that we saw. And so at that point, it's just kind of ride the trend, move the stops, that sort of thing. But Link is looking pretty good here. Technically speaking, the daily chart has room to run on the RSI if it wants to keep going. So definitely worth watching. How's it look on the USD side? Link, the trend is your friend, continues to march higher, not too shabby. Was hitting some overbought conditions here, has pulled back for the last couple of days, helped to reset it a little bit. 4-hour chart, nice little pullback that held around 260, 255. And so major target on the way up USD wise, this most recent swing high just above $3 is what I would be looking at for your next major target. So does it get there? I think so. It's not that big of a stretch to call it, from 270 to $3. That's only at this point another about 11-12% or so. So it's not a stretch to see that happen here in the next couple of days. After that, then I think it needs a breather. It will be extended at that point RSI wise. This would be an interesting level to see if it pauses below that. So that's probably what I'd be using as my target. Now that the BTC pair is kind of in no man's land, I'd look at the USD side and see how it starts to perform around that $3 mark. And we can see here, this has been a level to be watching here. Back here was a wick. Back here it briefly overshot. Here it tried to get going again and then finally rolled over. And so that's going to be an interesting juncture there if it gets $3. All right, looking at BCH, the Bitcoin Cash names. Are they done? Are they going to go again? These guys have just been crazy strong here. The thing to note about BCH is it had that big breakout on the daily chart, and that's a significant thing when you see that happen. And this is what I'm talking about right here. It had this major base that it put in over multiple months, right? This is going back to June of 2019, and you can see this was multiple levels of resistance tested, couldn't break it, finally did, and when it did, I mean, it exploded out of that range with massive volume. Look at that volume, just crazy spike compared to the prior bars. And so that's significant when something builds a base that's multi-month, 6 months, and it finally blasts through on 10x volume. You got to pay attention to that because oftentimes they do just keep going even after they pull back. Short term, yeah, it got very extended, has been very choppy here, but man, it may not be done. It's still holding the 10 EMA. Next major target is around that 4.5, 0.045, and then above that, maybe 0.052 or something. But even from here on up, you're talking 12% just to retest the most recent highs. And then above that, it'd be a 30%er move. And that would also go a long ways in dropping that BTC dominance chart because Bitcoin Cash does, play a major factor in that. Any of the top 5 names, when they move that big versus Bitcoin, really impact the dominance chart. So Bitcoin Cash, let's zoom it in here a little bit. Go into that 4-hour chart. Bitcoin Cash. This needs to hold here and make another new high, because if not, the chart's going to start to look really weird, almost inverse head and shoulder type. But here's your target. Holding above 0.044. If it starts to hold above that, that's going to look like it wants more to go. But right now, absolutely, it needs to hold 0.037. If it loses that, I think then at that point it's done, and we'll look for more downside from here. But and then on that way down, probably what 0.03334 is what I'd be looking for. But yeah, it's interesting. On the 4-hour chart, it does look a lot more vulnerable. RSI continues to drift lower, but there's a very clear line in the sand being drawn here. It might be hard for you guys to see on the screen. Let me zoom in a little bit there. But very clear, support zone. When it's been dipping down into this level here, the buyers have stepped in versus BTC. So don't want to see it lose that if you're long on Bitcoin Cash. If it does lose that level, then I'm thinking you got another ways to go on the way down. So Bitcoin Cash, nonetheless, remains one of the stronger names in the market here. How's it looking USD wise? Probably a little head and shoulderish. Not looking pretty, to be honest with you. Very choppy at the highs here. Yeah, let me put EOS on the list. I wanted to look at EOS. Bitcoin Cash. So yeah, interesting here. And look at, there's a lower trend line here that this is also maybe going to break. Yeah, this is a tough one because it did have that parabolic move and it's looking rough here. All right, BSV, since we're on the names, BSV here. Let me move this wick out for you guys. And sorry about the. Here we go. And so we looked at this one last week. I said I don't like this this line in the sand. It looks like it wants to go lower. It finally did. It dropped below, but it didn't go too much further than that. How much further did it go? Another 15% or so, and then it just sat tight. And now we're seeing it kind of resurge here. Is it due for another leg high? This one is just, God, there's just so much drama, so much, so much stuff around this guy here. But if you were looking at the trend line, the lower trend line, when it finally broke above, this was maybe a place to look at it here. This one's tough. This is a tough call because it just feels so extended. But look at the daily chart. It actually pulled right back to the daily 10 EMA and is trying to bounce a little bit. My guess is it just makes a lower high and then starts to go again. But who knows? This was a wild one-day move here. Bitcoin Cash. All right, let's look at BAT, Basic Attention Token. Looking at the BAT here, I like the daily chart, the way this is starting to maybe form a low. You had this most recent swing low, a little bit of a double bottom test, didn't quite undercut the low, starting to go up again here, but it's getting symmetrical, right? You got a lower high forming here as well, and things are starting to coil up here. Definitely worth watching. The BMI, oh yeah, I got to get back to what the BMI is, but the Bull Momentum Index is showing some strength here, showing the underlying momentum starting to pick up speed. And if we look at the broader chart here, let me go kind of look at that, right? It had that big run on the weekly, pulled back, and is finding a new high around that 2200 level. And so bigger picture is also looking positive as a potential low being formed. So definitely one I'm watching here. If we zoom in on the 4-hour chart here, this is a nice pullback after that strong move. Big spike lower, but it has held up. Quick shakedown under those moving averages is starting to pop back up, and it's now testing this near-term resistance there. So for me, if it starts to hold above that line, which is 2570, then it looks like it's ready to go another higher. And I expect it would take this most recent high out at that point. So that's going to be one to be watching as some continuation. How would I trade this? This is a little bit tougher. You got to give this one a little bit wider stop. And honestly, I think this is probably a better trade for the daily charts. But on the 4-hour, even moving down to the swing low is only 6%. It's about 5.5%. So it wouldn't be too bad. And then on the way up here, I mean, I would need a 2-to-1, and definitely would need to take out these recent highs to make that 2-to-1. 2-to-1 puts me at about up here, which that lines up pretty well with this neckline. We'll see. I mean, that'd be one to watch. I think the daily chart is probably the better view on this guy. A little bit more longer view, just because it could be forming that higher high. And then at that point, you're looking at some bigger targets, right? You're looking at, up here as your potential targets on the daily chart. And from here up, that's 25% or so, maybe 30. So BAT, basic attention, not too shabby. All right, here, BSV is the real Bitcoin. Hey, we're all going to be proven wrong one day. When Craig unlocks the Satoshi stash, then it's over. If he actually would manage to pull that off and unlock the Satoshi stash, then yeah, it's over. He would just dump infinitum. And it would probably take down Bitcoin SV, to be honest with you. But anyway, it's all funny. It's all fun and games. It's all fun and games until someone blows something up. All right. Let's see here. What's next on the list? Jake in the house. BSV, BAT. Let's look at Zcash here real quick. I'm going to cycle through some of these privacy names a little quickly. Man, Zcash still going. What's with the privacy names? What's driving these things? Look at this pullback right to the 10 EMA, almost at the penny. Wicked it, undercutting this prior support. Probably shook some people out there and just bouncing right off here. Going to that 4-hour chart. Very interesting. Looks similar to, let me clear these lines. Looks very similar to the Bitcoin Cash chart in some ways, where you had the big move, the pullback, the overshoot, and then pullback, flat, popping. So real interesting. Daily chart looks much cleaner. This one, man, if it makes a lower high here, that's not going to be pretty. And definitely don't want to see it take out 5,600 if it does roll over from here, because then that's going to confirm a short-term top in place. Pivx. There's a small cap name from yesteryear. Oh, Pivx. Okay. Nice little green spike. You got to zoom out on Pivx because it does that frequently. This is Pivx here. That's the level to be watching. It's kind of been on the radar off and on for a while, but the positive is if you like Pivx, there seems to be some support being formed here since August, so there's a little bit of a base putting in, but it's got to close above this 3,600 level in my opinion before it starts to really look good. And at that point, it could have that quick spike higher like a lot of these names when they finally retake a resistance level. But short term, you're getting these quick spikes, but you've seen them in the past. A lot of them have been short-lived, kind of just roll over. That's tough. That's tough. Stellar Lumens. XOM. Looking at the Stellar Lumens. Still marching higher. Nice breakout on Stellar last week. Has been choppy though. Talk about wide and loose, and that's why I was talking last week about, hey, look at the pullbacks as opposed to chasing the big candles on the way up, because you're getting them right now, and so far they're not all of them, of course, and they only work until they don't. But so far, I mean, you're getting these pullbacks that do find some level of support, and then they just keep marching higher, making higher highs. So pretty good. Stellar Lumens looking pretty good there. How's it look on the daily chart here? Has had a nice retracement off the lows. If I did a fib bounce on this guy here, you're right at 50% now. That's your 50% retracement. I would say 618, which is around 785 or so, would be your major target to be watching on this first bounce. That also takes it to this prior little neckline on this small head and shoulders that rolled over. So, but hey, Stellar Lumens. XRP. Looking at the XRP, hasn't quite participated in this here, but it is forming this low. I think it's definitely worth watching for a potential move, a catch-up move, if you will. But there's going to be some resistance right above here. So around 3,000 sats is going to be your first big wall to be watching if it can clear that hurdle there. But even a range trade from here on up, you're talking 10%, 11% upside with a 4.5% downside risk, certainly well within the 2-to-1 ratio. So if you wanted a quick range trade scalp, that's something to be watching there. ETC, the one that's maybe finally topped here. Who knows? It's all over the place. It finally, we saw it going climactic last week. Right, this is the 1 hour view. It had that blow off, And yeah, sure enough, that was the move. And I hope you guys didn't chase that blow off top, because very quickly it was down 34% before finally settling out here. And right now it's just kind of going sideways, building on a little range here. You can see this zone right there, right at the upper end of that range. Daily chart still holding up. I'm gonna go to the daily chart. I mean, still holding up, but man, just crazy move up. I mean, it looks parabolic. What I think we'll see some of these here personally, Bitcoin SV, ETC, some of these, they're probably going to have another leg up, but I'm thinking they make lower highs. I'm thinking they run up here somewhere along the way. And then if they do make a lower high and start to roll over pretty hard, at that point, look out below. Will likely be the start of a broader downtrend in some of these names here. So just something to watch here. I mean, it's been a powerful move up, no doubt. Best case scenario, if you like some of these names, best case scenario would be they just get choppy in this range and go sideways for a little bit, kind of digest that move. At that point, things really reset. There's a new base established, and yeah, then it looks really bullish, right? Because it has a continuation move, right? There's a consolidation that turns into some sort of continuation pattern, maybe a ascending triangle, or a cup and handle or something like that, where on the higher time frames those are often very bullish patterns. And so that's kind of better case scenario is what you would want to see something like that form on those names that have had those big moves up. Cardano is one I like. I think it's another good catch-up name to be watching here. There's the 4-hour view. It had that little move off the lows. Hasn't seen a lot of follow through yet to be surprised there. Honestly, it's kind of interesting that it broke above range, pulled back here, trying to bounce, finding a little bit of selling pressure around that 500 Satoshi level. But if you go to the daily chart, this is also one that has just been forming this long base, and I think this is a better candidate to watch for more of a longer term time frame type scenario, right? Couple months or something. Because if it starts to break out of this range, then after the huge down move it's had, look at this, just crazy down move. It wouldn't take a whole lot of momentum coming back into this market to push this guy up. Not saying it's going to go all the way to these highs. Personally, I don't think Cardano will ever go near these highs again, 8,000 Satoshis. But even halfway up to here or here would be a fantastic move up. I mean, you're talking from here to here is 80%. From here to here would be 250%. And obviously we're talking weeks, right? Not like it's going to happen in a month. But this is interesting when you see these big, flat, long tails forming. It's always interesting to see when they finally do break out. Definitely one to watch. I think it's a good candidate to watch on the daily chart. Short-term trading, it's a little bit more choppy, but definitely one to watch here. Litecoin. Nice pullback on Litecoin. And we saw this one last week. It was at an interesting juncture, both on the BTC and the USD chart, which I'll look at next here. Looking at this, it ran right up to these prior resistance levels here, and most recently almost to the penny wicked it there, pulling back, but it's only pulled right back to the 10 EMA so far. And so this is kind of your zone to be watching for a higher low between here and I would say the lowest you want to see this go if it's going to make a strong higher low is maybe 6,100. Give or take. If it drops below that, it really starts to look ugly, like the big pattern of lower highs and lower lows is still in place, which technically could be, right? Here's a high, here's a new lower low, here's a lower high, here's a lower low. This could be a lower high. So you want to make a higher low on this daily and then take that out. Things start to look positive there, but pulling right back from a resistance level, horizontal price resistance, which just happens so often. It's just a real basic thing to watch. Here, $65. 64 was that level and almost went there. There was a little front running. 63.20 was as much as it could muster, and pulling right back. $57 at this point, still above the 10 EMA on the daily. Trend is your friend. I think it needs some more sideways action. That'd be the best case scenario here. Instead of rolling over, I'd like to see some sideways. But when it comes to the USD pairs, most of what's going to matter for these guys is going to be what Bitcoin does. If Bitcoin really sees a strong pullback, then those USD pairs on the alts are going to have that big strong pullback. And that's why I look at the BTC pairs so often, because when the pullback ends, I'm always going to be watching for, hey, what are those names that are strong, showing good relative strength versus Bitcoin? And then that's what I'm going to be looking for to outperform on the way up when Bitcoin starts to bounce again. And so that's why the USD pairs, you have to factor that element in. They may look good on their own, but then, with Bitcoin still representing over 70% of the crypto space, when it moves, the other ones move USD wise. And so just, that's why it's such a big factor. Walton. All right, now we're going to, or actually, before I go in small cap land, let me look at a few more big cap names that were on the request list here. BNB, definitely worth watching here off the lows, starting to make higher highs, higher lows, held above, let me move this here, held above this prior breakout point. If I can move it, there we go. So there was a good resistance level here at that 193 level. Good volume on the way out. So this candle here was the highest daily volume going back to November, mid-November. And that was this candle here that pushed through. And it just kind of chopped and flopped around a little bit. But that's been healthy. It's let the moving averages catch up. It's still holding the line, which is positive. And so definitely one to watch. Looks like it wants to attempt another move up. So I definitely would be watching that guy. Next major target on the way up here would be around 21 and change, maybe 21.5 in and around there. So that's what I'd be watching. That's not really that much of a move percentage wise. It's only 6 to 7%, but it's looking positive on the daily chart here. How's USD wise? I haven't seen the USD chart on this one in a long time. USD, man. See, this guy dropped from the all-time high of $38 right back down to 12 and is bouncing. And you don't want to see this one make a lower high, because that just will continue that pattern, right? You get this highs and lows and lower highs and lower lows and maybe lower highs. Hopefully not. Hopefully, and I'm thinking a lot of these alts are putting in a longer-term low, but more from the BTC pairs, right? USD-wise, you can see them break lows if Bitcoin rolls over. But relative to Bitcoin, I think they're looking much better than they were last year. EOS, same story. I like EOS. Good long breakout from this base. Big volume on the breakout. That was positive. Pulling right back to the 10 EMA. Looks like a good secondary entry point here. And holding above the breakout zone. And I know there's some fundamental catalysts that may be helping this with some launches and stuff. So this one could be one that definitely runs here versus Bitcoin in the near term. And again, this is coming off of a big, long time pullback here. Just well off the highs, near historic lows, at least, for the last 2 years, right? Pre or post bubble lows, right? This stuff back here doesn't really matter a whole lot, but has put in a big base here. And so that's definitely worth watching here. If we look at the weekly chart, it's a little bit more pronounced, the volume that we saw last week. Very positive. Right. Even the prior week was well above average, was above average. So just kind of voice. Voice. Just watching this one for sure. I know some of the folks in the Slack group are very, very bullish on EOS and watch it a lot more closely from a project perspective. But I think even technically speaking, the charts are looking good. And this is more longer term. Short term, there's definitely some trading opportunity here as well, right? This pullback right into this zone, worth watching here with a tight stop just below, 4,000 or so. But longer term, I think it's a good one to, along with Cardano, right? Some of those names that have had that big pullback, big base, bigger cap names, familiar to the crypto community, right? They're not some obscure small cap name that's coming out of nowhere. Many of these names are just, they're familiar and they're accessible, which is always a good thing, because they're accessible from a wide variety of exchanges, right? You don't have to go to just one or two exchanges that that are kind of new or something. I mean, these are established names, so definitely worth watching there. All right, let's go to small cap land here. And as I wrap it up, looks like BSV's on the move. Some alerts just came through here. If you're just joining, let me do a recap on Bitcoin here, and then I'll do some small cap names. So if you're just joining us here, daily chart wise, technically Bitcoin is still okay, holding the 10 EMA, still above the 22, which is around 8,200. And there's this major support level right there, that prior breakout point here. But it is important to note that price rallied right up to the resistance point that we were watching, around that 9,000 level, 9,100. Overshot on Sunday and has had a quick pullback from that point on some good volume too. And so the big question is this the start of a broader pullback, right? That takes us, back down to the 8Ks, or is this just a quick shakeout and we kind of chop around here before finally blasting through that 9,200 level and onto 10K, right? And it's going to depend on what happens here over the next couple of days. If price just sits tight, starts to build some support, that's going to really let things set up here, just like it did back here where it built this little base. It would also set up for another base here as well. But if it just makes a little bit of a lower high on the 4-hour chart, which is what I'm going to be watching, because the moving averages have crossed over bearish. This big fake out move up to 9,200 followed by a big reversal straight down to 8,500. That's bearish, very bearish, negative, technically speaking. And so I'm personally thinking eventually it gets back down to 8,300 or so, maybe even lower. But what I'm going to be looking for is either a quick break here, then things get oversold. At that point, I think you're due for a good bounce. If not, then what I'm going to look for is a lower high on that 4-hour chart here. And then if it starts to roll over, then at that point, I'm going to load up the shorts again and wait for a new lower low to be made before closing them out. I did manage to catch this over the weekend. It was kind of a quick fade the rally move. Very aggressive short entry, I know, but it was turned out to be a fantastic trade. Very short-lived. I think I was in the trade for maybe 7 or 8 hours. And now I'm flat Bitcoin, so I'm not in any Bitcoin, but I am still holding my Tezos position. And so we'll see what happens there. I think if Bitcoin sees another leg down, that may put the squash on Tezos as well. A lot of the USD pairs will see some retracement if Bitcoin shoots another leg down. But right now, just kind of going sideways. Could go either way from here. Sorry, that's my alarm. Could go either way from here, but we'll see. Leaning bearish and not a lot of bounce following this move, but could see that BART move that we always see so often in this space. It does one of these straight down, sideways, straight up. And those are just kind of annoying. That's why when you start to see that pattern, just sometimes it's better to sit tight. But yeah, no, that was crazy. It was, most people were, I think, asleep, because I think when I entered my trade, it was just an evening. It was Saturday evening my time, and probably close to about midnight. And I just happened to crack things open. I had finished watching the movie, and I was like, man, this looks like a really good short here. And then I woke up and I closed it. So yeah, not holding any BTC. And I'm talking about my trading account, by the way, guys. When I say I'm flat Bitcoin, that means I don't have a long trade on Bitcoin at the moment. Oh, let me see here. I'm looking on some of the comments here. There's a few names you guys want to look at. So yeah, KMD. We're gonna go into small cap land here. I haven't looked at IOTA. That's not technically a small cap, but absolutely. Let's take a look at IOTA. And we never looked at Tron. I'm surprised nobody asked about Tron. Yeah, that's a good point on the 50 EMA. I'm glad you brought that up. Let me go back to so let me load this up again real quick. So there's the 50 EMA and there's the 200. And this is always interesting, right? I don't know if you guys ever look at this, right? So here's the view. Actually, let me go to a different chart that's a little cleaner. Here's the view with no price, but moving averages only. And so this line here is the 200-day. That's the one that's on top. That's kind of rolling over. And then you have the 50 EMA, which is this white line right here that's finally tricking higher. And then you've got the short-term moving averages, the 10 and the 22, just running right up, right? And you can see there's this convergence starting to happen right here, which is why I would not mind a little bit of consolidation to let these things flatten out a little bit, because you've got the 200-day, whoops, sorry. You got the 200-day, if I can get my drawing tool, kind of rolling down. You got the 50-day rolling up. Eventually, you want those to cross, right? That's going to be very positive if that 50-day finally crosses above the 200-day. And obviously, if price continues higher, that's what we're going to see happen. But the 50-day moving average is still way down here at 7,900. And so even if you get a pullback down to this point and the 50-day catches up, that puts you around 8K, 8,300, depending on how fast the pullback happens. And that's a good first test, right? If price pulls right back to that 50-day EMA and bounces off there, things start to look positive. And so it's just always interesting to see, when you take the noise of the chart away, the price action, and you look at just trend analysis, which is why I look at EMA pairs, by the way. It's always interesting to see, I look at something like Bitcoin Cash, right? Obviously just spiking up. Not this one, this is a line. But the moving averages, but still negatively correlated, right? 50 EMA is still below the 200. Compare that to something else like a EOS, right, where you've got that one still moving up. Here's Link. Look at Link. Just pulling higher, right? Just popping up there. This is Link USD. Let's go to the Link BTC pairs. There you go. There's Lisk. Wrong one. That looks ugly. Here's Link. Look at this. Moving averages rally. They pull right back, hold, rally, pull right back, hold, rally. It's just kind of interesting to see that broader trend. But most everything, look at this. Blah. Blah. Yeah, okay. Little life there. Blah. Come on, alts. Show some life. But anyway. So let's get back to small cap land here, and then we'll get going. Then I'm going to go get some lunch and probably call it a day. It's a little bit of a shorter day for me here. IOTA daily. Nice trend so far. I would definitely be watching that lower trend line. Feels a little maybe like it's wedging, but it's still going. It does feel like it's wedging a little bit here. But still going. Not too bad. Let me move some of these lines off. It gets too noisy for me at some point. I'd be watching that lower trend line. Other than that, trend is your friend. I'm not so sure I would be chasing it here. There's a bearish divergence showing up here on this RSI as well. IOTA, Tron sitting tight. Did finally break that downtrend, but hasn't really followed through. But it's still holding this moving average pair, so it's going to be interesting to see if that's the pullback, the secondary entry, right? That's what you want to see. I'm slightly bearish, slightly caution on Bitcoin, so that's gonna be a factor in a lot of these names that I look at here this week, right? The question is always, should I try to stick it out with some alts, or should I just sit tight, wait for Bitcoin to do its thing, or both, or hedge, short Bitcoin, long alts? Technically, when you long alt BTC pairs, you're short Bitcoin in theory, right? You're asking for alts to outperform. Here's Komodo. I don't know if that's how you say it, but KMD. Interesting. Potential reversal forming here. So it made still technically a lower high, but you've got this retest of this high. You got a lower low. If it forms a higher low, then yeah, you got this reversal pattern starting to form. The volume patterns are positive, right? The volume spikes on the way up. Whoops. Not that far. Here. And this second one here as well. That's positive all around. So, yeah. If it can take out this neckline here on a pullback, then yeah, you've got a little inverse head and shoulder forming on that daily chart. And the way I would do it is measured move and extrapolate that from the breakouts, and you're talking about 870 to 900, 908, which lines up pretty well with resistance back here. If it can break out. Dash. Forgot about the dash. Dash is never going down ever again. Looking at Dash, I mean, what a move that was. Had nice little pullback. I know some of you guys on the Slack group are back in the Dash. We'll see. It'd be nice if it makes a higher high and gives you that big move up. That's a big percentage move too. If we zoom in here a little bit, let me go to the 4-hour view. I mean, from here up, that's 20 to 25%, right? If it does. But it's going to be interesting to see if you get front running into this level and it just makes a lower low. Best case scenario, in my opinion, what I'd love to see would be something like this, where Dash does one of these. Because then that's a powerful setup, very bullish, and at that point, then you're looking at big breakout move, right? That'd be nice. Can't write these names off. Those ones that have had those big moves off the lows, clearly back in vogue, clearly in play. Even if they pause and consolidate for a couple of weeks, you got to keep them on the radar. See, until they're done, right? Until they're done. V-Chain. I don't think we've seen a whole lot of change in V-Chain. Yeah, we really haven't. I mean, it has pulled right back to the prior little breakout point here. Just kind of consolidating, you know, net, it's positive, I think. You know, just it's making higher highs and higher lows here in recent history. So net's positive. I think that looks pretty good. A little bit of a breakout here, and it's trying to bounce off that level right now. So yeah, it's not bad. You know, it's kind of holding up after this run that it had. It's just consolidating right now and digesting some of that. So yeah, it's definitely worth watching. I think it looks good. Why am I bearish? Oh, bearish on Bitcoin. I guess bearish is probably too strong of a word. I'm looking for a little bit more pullback. I guess that's the way to say it. I'm not bearish like, hey, that's the end of the move and we're going to 5K. I'm not Peter Schiff bearish. That's the way to say it. Oh. Civic. Oh, man, there's a name from yesteryear. Let's go look at that guy. Civic. I have not followed this project in a long time, so I don't know if they're still working on it or what the deal is, if we're all going to have chips embedded in our skin with Civic identities, but what is going on? The chart's not pretty. There are some volume spikes coming off the lows, but man, talk about a pullback. If we zoom in here a little bit, these small cap, micro cap names, they just trade so wide and loose. Like from a trading perspective, it's hard to do a lot with these because of these. You get these massive wicks on literally no volume, you know, big spike to the upside. So it's hard to move. They're not very liquid. But, you know, from a long-term perspective, if you're like, you know, trying to catch the low or something, honestly, I would wait for a higher high and a higher low to be formed on the daily charts before some of those, because there's just no telling it's done yet, right? It could continue to march lower. Sia coin. Oh, yeah. I forgot about Sia coin. Yeah, look at it. It's at an 18 sat level. Wow. And those small sat names, like from a percentage move, even if there's a little spike, I mean, it's just a huge percentage move, right? But that cuts both ways. I mean, it could quickly spike to here, and that's 36%. But, you know, it works both ways, right? You could see a quick spike down, and it's like 20%. So a move from 18 to 14 sats, that's a 20% drop. Ocean. You know, Ocean was hitting the alerts a few weeks back, and I was like, what's Ocean? I never heard of Ocean before, but it looks like it's pulling back here a little bit. I'd be watching this downtrend. You could almost say that's a falling wedge starting to form potentially. maybe. Look at that. So a break above this downtrend line takes out that falling wedge, and then at that point you look at the kind of a measured move or a fib retracement level as your first target. Feather coin. Oh man, you guys are reaching way back. RLC was on the list last week for some strong momentum there. It is holding a base, potential pullback. See if it holds this pullback zone. It did break out, but no follow through. Look at that, pulled right back in. Let's see here, Neo, and I'll do Tezos again real quick and probably wrap it up. I'm liking Neo here from this perspective. Like, it was getting tight, very range bound, and popping above, starting to hold above that point. So definitely worth watching here. Higher time frames also looking like maybe it's finding a low. Here's the weekly chart. You know, after this gigantic downtrend, we saw the big spike up. And again, remember that spike? That was the China is bullish on blockchain spike a couple months back. And it set tight. But so far it's holding up. It's building a little bit of a base. You're seeing some volume coming in. So from a long-term perspective, definitely worth watching. You know, I'd be looking at some of that. Near term, if you wanted to keep a tight stop, let me go back to the daily. This low here has clearly turned into a significant support zone. You know, it lasted almost a month and a half, a month or so. So, you know, 1160 or so is your first stop. Then below that, I don't know. It's really hard to say. There's a gap below that, all the way down to 1,000 sat. All right. I'm thinking that's it, my friends. Let me see. I'm gonna just quickly scan. Engine was looking interesting. Engine. Oh, remember that descending triangle? Looks like that broke lower. Engine dropped to the line there. It looked vulnerable, and it looks like it did bounce. So far, no love. Needs to break. I would want to see it on the daily chart start getting above these moving averages personally. All right, I'll do a couple more here and wrap it up. I did look at Tezos. I'm still long this guy. I like it. It had that big breakup last week after hitting oversold conditions after a big pullback, a little bit of a flag. It is wide and loose, no doubt. Definitely quick spikes up and down, but it's finally edging out. Looked like it wants to get going. Another leg higher is underway. First major target I'm looking at is around this 1900s range, low 1900s range, and then around 2100, which lines up with a Fibonacci retracement level. And so, you know, and I don't think it just goes straight up personally. I think it's going to just march its way there if it gets that high. So far, so good. We'll see if it turns out to be the port in the storm. If we see more downside action on the pullback, maybe this turns out to be the holdout name. But good first couple of days off this reversal. It popped, pull back for a few days, and then popping higher today on volume. So the signs are positive there. All right, so let me go over this here, kind of recap for those that are joined a little later here in the stream. I did Bitcoin at the start, then I did Tezos Link, Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin SV, Basic Attention, Zcash, Pivx, Stellar, Ripple, Ethereum Classic, Cardano, Litecoin, BNB, EOS, and then after that, what did I do? I did IOTA, Tron, KMD, and then we just started kind of whatever names came to mind after that. So did a bunch. Walton coin is on the radar for some reason. Trending names, Walton, Chain, Theta. We never looked at Theta. But Walton showing up there. Theta showing up here. A little bit of a curl coming off the bottom here. We'll see if it can finally push through. Looks like it's basing out there. That looks good. What else? Ethereum, DX, I want to look at those, blah, blah, blah. Steam. Nice, spiky Steam. Big base though. So that's it. So from a near-term trading perspective, mostly I'm going to be watching Bitcoin. I think BTC, couple of different ways. If it drops, yeah, I'll cover BMI before I wrap up. Good, thanks for reminding me. If Bitcoin drops the low here, then I'm just going to wait for some oversold conditions on the short-term charts and then start looking for a scale into the 8,200 range for a bounce. If it pushes higher, then I'm going to look for a lower high on the 4-hour chart. If it just kind of goes sideways, consolidates, then that puts me more into the bullish camp at that point and say, okay, likely going to push higher at that point on the daily because the daily is still holding up okay. But the fact that it rejected from that near-term significant resistance level is worth noting. And I personally would like to see some pullback for a few days, higher low formed on the daily chart. Then that really sets things up for a push over that 9K range. So some short-term action names. Cardano, I think, is a good catch-up name. Hasn't quite seen the bigger moves that many of these bigger caps have. And so that's what I'm looking at here. Longer term, yeah, when I say longer term, I'm talking like the weekly charts at that point. And so like Cardano and some of these names have just been in these multi-month bases. You know, longer term, I'm thinking like, is this something that I may be interested in holding, right, for the next few months or even for the rest of the year, right? If we end up turning into a crypto rally, right? If it turns into a bigger thing, certainly looking at those. That's what I mean. So kind of longer term, daily, weekly charts. Near term, 4-hour charts, right? So Cardano for a potential catch-up name. Some of the stronger names here today. Link, looking good. Potentially wants to break out a range there. I'd use the USD pair as my targets scenario there. What was the other one? EOS, pull right back to that breakout point on the daily. Nice little flag potentially forming here. We'll see if that one holds. Tezos, I already looked at that, but that's I got a position there still. Or some of the other ones here. BAT, was BAT one of them? BAT, yeah, BAT's looking pretty good there. I like BAT, trying to edge out of this range, looking pretty good there. And then some of the names that have been the strong ones as of late, I'm thinking they bounce, but maybe they put in lower highs. So, you know, that's the BCH, the BSVs of the world, maybe Ethereum Classic Dash, right? Probably bouncing, but I'm betting they make lower highs personally. Best case scenario, they go sideways for a while, like I said, and then that sets up a broader bullish setup for a longer term move. So that's it, my friends. Should be an interesting week. Hopefully more of a breather week, consolidation week, and not a watch out below week. But I think next 2 days is going to say a lot for Bitcoin. And so a little bit more of a neutral stance here, but we'll see what happens. I will certainly make some update videos as the week progresses. So there was a question on the BMI, the body mass index. No, actually that stands for the bull momentum index. I did post some videos. They're not on the site yet. If you're part of the Slack group, they're linked in the education channel on the Slack side of things. But I did post some videos. One of them was, what is the BMI? How is it calculated? And essentially what it is, I have this at the bottom of my charts here. And this is an oscillator, right? It's a proprietary indicator that I wrote, and that's what it is. And it just essentially tells me, you know, the bull momentum, the buyers and the sellers, who's in control. And if, you know, there's zones is how I look at it. Anything below 40 is kind of the bear zone for me. That's this red section. Anything between 40 and 60 or 40 and 65, that's the yellow zone. And really, it just depends on what the macro trend looks like. If the daily trend is strong and things dip into the yellow, then it's just a pullback. If things are sharply down and they bounce into the yellow, probably a good short entry, right? So that's how I look at it. And then above that, it's the bull zone, and then above 95, briefly it gets into the strong zone. But so that's it in a nutshell. Obviously, there's a lot more to it, but the BMI drives a lot of this chart here. So there's a trading strategy that I've developed around it for both the daily and the 4-hour charts. It helps spot the trending names. I list the BMI here on the charts. BMI is also used here on the alerts cards. There's BMI. You can see the BMI rating for the top cryptos here, and I use the mixed rating here, which is a multi-time frame rating. And so, you know, it kind of helps in a lot of different ways. The BMI watch list, what's strong. Actually, we didn't look at this. Let me see, Binance. What's on the names? BAT, we saw that. BCH, Bread, okay. CDT, Data, Link, Pivx, Stellar, Tezos. A couple small cap names on there. So that's how we use it. It's used all over the place here, but it's basically it's a proprietary indicator. It works very much like an oscillator. Bread, little spike there. What was the other one? CDT. These are small, man. Yeah. Data. Okay. So yeah, I say BMI. Sometimes I forget that I'm just using terminology, and people are going, "What? What is BMI, man? How old am I? I'm less than 40. I'm over 30." Actually, I like to tell myself I'm still in my 20s. Okay. Hey guys, thanks for being here as always. I appreciate you guys joining the stream today and the comments. I wish you a good rest of your day. We'll see you all on the other side.